Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
Hello there, very good morning and welcome to Newsline. We're coming to you live from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. I'm Sonali Waniga Baduge. Now today is the 22nd of February 2016. It happens to be Navam Full Moon Poya Day. It was on a day like today that the first Sangha Sammelanaya was held, and also Sariyut and Mughal Maharahat Theras were awarded the Agra Shravaka post also on a day like today. Now, the Constitution in Article 2713 states that it is the responsibility of the state to promote with special care the interests of children and youth, to ensure their full development, physical, mental, moral, and to protect them from exploitation and discrimination. But quite in juxtaposition to this, we hear reports increasingly of children being molested, raped, brutally killed. How do we address this issue? To discuss this and more, we have with us in our studio this morning a child rights expert. She goes by Dr. Hiranthi Vijaymanna. She has served as a chairperson of the National Child Protection Authority as well. Good morning, Dr. Vijaymanna.
Good morning. Yes.
Thank you for joining us early this morning.
Yes, thank you for inviting
Let's get right to it. Now, children are the most vulnerable section of society, but every day we hear of children being molested, raped, murdered. It's a dire situation. So, as an expert in this field, what are the reasons you attribute to this increase?
Well, there are several reasons, Sonali. For example, there is, of course, we have to remember that now there is certainly better reporting.
That's right.
For many years, the issues of particularly sexual abuse was hidden from society.
Right.
And people didn't know, children didn't report, and there were no women and children police desks even to report to. And the penal code changes to make it an actual criminal offence came about in the mid-1990s. So actually it was in the 1990s that first of all the attention zoomed in on the issue of child abuse and exploitation. Because until then, even internationally, people were interested in the health, education, all these other aspects of children. And this was a sort of it was like an iceberg phenomenon. We knew only the tip of it. Now it's coming out. And it's there all over the world. It's not, I think, only Sri Lanka. And I think the fact that at least we recognize it is the first step. But I'm afraid we are really not doing enough. We are not doing enough. It is a multi-sectoral problem. Law enforcement is involved, legal people are involved in terms of the judicial processes, families are involved, they have to give protection to children, schools are involved, there is abuse going on in schools and in society in general, because every individual from birth to 18 is considered a child. It's not only the little ones, but every person under the age of 18. That is what we have agreed to in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, to which Sri Lanka is a signatory, that we will protect this vulnerable group, approximately 1/3 of our population, because it is that foundation of protection, not only access to education and health and other services, that will enable the child to function as a fully developed, healthy, well-functioning adult. So perhaps some of the problems we have among our adults today could stem from these kinds of issues, unaddressed, unseen, unobserved in childhood.
Also, something that we see is that in a great number of child abuse related cases, we find that the abuse is systemic, and that the perpetrator is most often someone who's close to the family, either a close relative or someone who's very trusted. How do we deal with this?
This is, of course, a universal phenomenon, because this idea is that this stranger comes and performs the abuse is not really correct. It is definitely family members. It might be one's immediate family, it might be the extended family, it may be so-called friends of the family, right, people who associate with that family. And then of course we also have to remember that schools are also places where abuse can take place. Sometimes older children towards younger children, and so the communities where the child actually operates could also be breeding grounds for abusers. And also we must remember there's another very unfortunate aspect of abuse is that abusers do not immediately abuse children, they groom them.
Right.
So-called.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's like this: abusers who can spot a child whom they would like to abuse, and then they groom them. It's not difficult to groom children. You give them sweets, you give them gifts, you talk to them nicely, and all this happens. And often that is what is bad about it. It's cloaked in all secrecy. And the child is made to feel this secret that this child is having is something very special, and they build a relationship. And I'm afraid this grooming can now take place through the internet as well, and that also is being discovered because we know the digital world has entered the lives of children, and so the grooming can take place, and so then children get victimized. So it's complex. And it involves many different sectors. It has to involve the family first. Families have to give protection, be able to detect, to know if their child changes his or her behavior, if there's some problem, and try to find out and be close to the child so the child will confide. And of course in schools, in the so-called tuition classes that go on all over, because the emphasis unfortunately for the child is doing this A-level and O-level and getting into the university and Shishatva and those kinds of things. Maybe they are worried about the health if the child falls ill, but they rarely give attention to this other aspect. And one other thing I want to also say is that child porn is a terrible scourge in this world, and that also is operating and is very difficult to find out, and that also feeds into perpetrators. And of course access to the cyber cafes and digital technology. So it's unfortunate, and of course we have to remember another thing is that 3 to 5% of tourists come for child sex. And Sri Lanka, some years ago when I was involved in this work, we did discover that Sri Lanka, Thailand and Philippines were 3 countries where this happened, and I don't know whether there is a system, a structure, surveillance to find out is this happening.
Right. Let's talk a bit about the law enforcement authorities. Now, Sri Lanka has a legal structure. There are statutes to ensure the protection of children and young persons. Then there's the Child Protection Authority. There's the Women and Children's Bureau. All these systems are in place. But the number of incidents of child abuse keep on increasing. So how is this happening?
Well, I think first of all, prevention is important. Prevention has to start in the family and in the school. And also prevention means also giving protective education to children, to talk about these things to them. I mean, there is this big reluctance in our society to talk about child abuse, sexuality, give sex education. I think children in schools need to be given protective education.
But sex education has been included in our curriculum.
No, it's in the curriculum, but I wonder whether it's actually being taught to children, because I think some years ago I was involved in an evaluation program on a UN project where they gave booklets on reproductive health to schools and wanted teachers to teach them, but then teachers themselves were reluctant to talk about it. They said me parichedaya gedara gihilla adarata kiyawala heta enna kind of thing.
Right.
So I mean, let's face it, we are somewhat reluctant as a society, and it's, I think, a South Asian phenomenon. It's not only Sri Lanka but many countries like ours where cultural traditions are very strong, gender stereotyping is strong. To talk about, I mean, for a doctor like me it's easy because it's not an issue, but then for lots of people it is an issue. So I think the secrecy, the hidden element is what keeps it going. So that's one aspect. I mean, the law enforcement, there are women and children police desks. Certainly there are. But then there has to be reporting, they have to be receptive, there has to be follow-up, action has to be taken. And I'm afraid the legal process is so long. Children often have said they are more sometimes victimized by the legal process than the abuse itself. So these are very serious issues. We have to look at these systems. Can they be more child-friendly? Can they be more child-focused? And also I think a lot of coordination is necessary. Just the NCPA or just one group can't do it alone. Really everyone has to join in, and I think that is really the answer to make it work.
So do you believe that the government has a greater role to play in ensuring that children's rights are protected?
Definitely, because I think Sri Lanka signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child way back, one of the first countries to put its signature, that children have rights. I mean, we talk a lot about rights, but I don't know, I feel we don't talk much about children's rights. Children have a right to be protected within their family, within the community, within the schools they go to. Those are mostly, a lot of them are state schools, there are also private schools, and they need to be protected also from using digital technology to abuse them. So, and even the tourism sector, I think they have to play a role in making sure that in the guise of tourism we don't have pedophiles coming into this country and also using that opportunity to exploit children. See, we need to remember poverty is still an issue in this country. And most of these people use money, use gifts
to lure
children. So our children need protection not just by name but by action. And I know there's lots of seminars, workshops, marches. I don't know whether those are really what we need. We need really some action. We need a good active group checking all the time, looking after our children. Our families sometimes are unable to give them the protection due. We know mothers leave children and go to the Middle East because they cannot survive, they can't get maintenance if there's domestic violence, or leave their husbands. There's alcoholism, drug abuse. So, protection has to be high on the agenda. I think NCPA does what it can. I was also involved in it. But it's just one body. I think every single group who can contribute has to contribute, including the judiciary and the law enforcement. They have to place children up at a high priority. It's not a question of it's part of everything else.
Right.
Part of a robbery, part of a adult something. But if putting children's rights up on the agenda is actually making an investment for the future of this country.
Okay. In a lot of parts of Sri Lanka, something that we find, especially in rural parts of Sri Lanka, is that both parents go to work, invariably leaving the child at home to his or her own devices. In fact, last week, on the 14th of this month, an incident was reported where a girl child in Vaunia was found sexually molested and killed and found hanging at a location in her house. So there are these competing interests where parents have to go to work. So where do they keep the child? These are practical difficulties. How do you...
well, I think parents first of all need to know, if they both leave the child and go to work, they have to establish some kind of protective system. They have to find out, maybe there's a friendly neighbor, there's an older aunt, someone else who could provide some protection. And secondly, they have to get children to talk, to say, to discuss, because this abuse doesn't just take place as an instant reaction. Someone may have groomed the child, had access to the child, spoken to the child. So I think parents need to come out into the open and tell children this is a risk that is there in society. So, and get them to actually articulate about their life. They are mainly interested in their education rather than other things. Who are their friends? Whom do they mix with? Is there someone in that community who's chatting this child up? and grooming this child to be abused. So these are things.
Dr. Vijayaman, is it correct to say that
Yes.
parents themselves have sort of mistaken their priorities by focusing mainly on education and not on the child's well-being, the child's mental psyche, as it were?
That's right. Because I think life skills are very important, and children, if they begin to associate with, shall we say, some kind of a risk person, identify a change in behavior of the child. The children tend to keep secrets, and sometimes bad secrets which can harm them. So I think parents need to have a good relationship with the child. That's the first thing, so that if there is the event of some danger to the child comes and is able or has the confidence, capacity, ability to tell the mother or the father or even an aunt, a grandmother, look, this is happening to me. This teacher from school or tuition master or an older boy living in the village is chatting me up. Right. Because we see the final event in terms of a death or a rape, which is what comes in but we rarely know what has happened before that.
The backstory, yeah.
The grooming that has taken place. So I think so we need to look at this in much greater depth than just the police and the law enforcement. That comes really at the end, and obviously that has to be effective too, and I'm afraid law delay certainly doesn't help at all. Because so many children are really victimized when they have to go through a lengthy legal process, keep appearing in court, talking about a rape which happened so many years ago. I mean, this kind of thing. Video evidence is now can be used, but not in every court. It's not being used. So we have to learn also from other countries who have tackled this problem and really develop a comprehensive program.
I think, Dr. Vijayamani, you brought out a very interesting point about how parents need to have a very close relationship with their children. Here also, practically what we see is children are very scared to come and talk to their parents. For example, even having a relationship or liking someone in school is considered taboo. It's very stigmatized. So there are a lot of parents watching us right now. How do you expect parents to break these barriers and to deal closely with their children?
Well, I mean communication. Well, I don't know if I can explain that to you, but I think it's a relationship you have to build from early childhood. And I mean this whole business of we have it in our culture, the obedience thing. You worship your parents even when you're married. On your marriage day you worship your parents. It's a sort of there's a power relationship, but that is not conducive to having one-to-one where a child, actually I would love it if at some point we can get every child to be able to say not only the good things that happen to them, coming first or doing well in school, they can also say the bad things to the parent and have confidence that the parent will not judge them and love them the same. So I think because bad things happen to children, I mean, let's face it, and bad things happen to everyone at some point in their life. So I think we need to establish better communication between parents and their children, and I think we need to also teach our children to talk out. One thing I notice when I travel around and I go to a school or I mean, I don't always I say මොකක් හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියනවාද මොකක් හරි දෙයක් ගැන කතා කරන්න කැමතිද most of the time they don't. So what I do is I give them slips of paper and without their name, right. And I say, okay, you put your question, particularly with adolescents this is a big issue, and I say put your question down, and when I look at the question I'm amazed because there's so many things about sexual health, about family planning, about porn, about relationships, maybe even homosexuality, whatever. And then when I ask them, I raise these questions, give some answers, and then afterwards if I tell them, okay, you can come individually and talk to me, they do, because I suppose as a doctor all their inhibitions go down. And I say, why don't you talk about this to your parents? And they say, "Ane, wana kata karanda baya amala taatala ekka."
We are in conversation with Dr. Hiranti Vijaymanna. We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
Shaukat Ali.
Welcome back. We are in conversation with Dr. Hiranti Vijaymanna, who is a child rights expert. Dr. Vijaymanna, parents have a common misconception that it is only the girl child who must be protected. However, we find that abuse isn't just limited to the girl child. The boy child has also got to be protected. And they also fall prey to a lot of pedophiles. How do you view this?
Yeah, I think that's quite true, because the reason I think is that boys can't get pregnant. But that's not a good reason, and I think we need to remember that boys and girls are both at risk of abuse, particularly sexual abuse. So I think first thing is, one important thing is to bring it into the open. I mean, any kind of problem, however bad it is, bring it into the open. Parents need to talk to their children about these things. In the West, actually, they start protective education from a very early age. The bathing suit area, you can't let someone touch you there. Bad touching, good touching. I think openness in talking about these things. So parent education, family education, schools teaching children about these things. Any kind of unpleasant, difficult problem, I think the first step to solve it is to bring it out, talk about it. And then also the fact that there are these predators around. They might come in the guise of very friendly mamas and uncles and whatever, but part of their hidden agenda is this. Now, I think also, Sonali, just want to tell you that we can't create a fear psychosis among families and communities that anyone who's nice to you is a potential pedophile. I mean, we don't want that to happen, because sometimes reading these newspapers, it could, people might think everyone who's nice to you that's not right. That's not right. But I think families need to be aware, and children most of all need to have that confidence to be able to tell parents, look, there is this older boy who's, cultivating me or being friendly with me or giving gifts to me, money to me or whatever, or some mama from somewhere or whatever, So I think trying to get children to talk, somehow this thing, children should be seen and not heard, happens. I know, because in schools when I ask children, come out with some questions, they look at the teachers and they're frightened to talk. But I think even teachers need to know if the child has a problem. Teachers need to know, parents need to know. And I think bringing it out, because this abuse and exploitation, again let me re-emphasize, thrives on secrecy. And then by the time it comes out, it might be too late. The girl might be raped or sexually assaulted, or for that matter boys. I think we don't even know the extent to which boys are abused. It doesn't even surface. So and it leaves terrible marks, because they don't have access to treatment, therapy. So I would say prevention to the extent possible. Don't wait for something to happen and then expect the police to work fast and for the judicial system to work fast and access to psychological therapy and for them to recover, which takes a long time. And then the whole stigmatization.
Right.
You have to prevent, and that must happen in schools, in families, in communities, and we must be able to openly talk about it and say we don't want this to happen, so that any potential pedophiles, I think they do need access to therapy, and because they also are doing this because of a reason. And
exactly. I'd like to draw your attention, Dr. Vijaymanna, to the perpetrators, the predators themselves. There is no system in place where we can catch hold of a paedophile or a predator before they attack their prey. So also the law enforcement authority now in other countries, there are cyber nannies who monitor Facebook accounts and chat rooms, and they catch hold of pedophiles and child predators before they act. So in Sri Lanka there is no such system.
Yes, actually when I was in NCPA, and I think Professor Harendra also was very much involved in that, there was a cyber surveillance system.
Right.
It's a very difficult thing to do, you know, and the thing is that so cyber surveillance is certainly important, is useful and can help. And of course the other thing is that pedophiles in some countries, they are tagged. You know, when they are convicted, say for so many years or whatever it is, they get into a file, and that they are not allowed to function in schools or daycare centers or anywhere where children are. So there's some kind of a surveillance system connected with them as well. And of course they also have access to therapy because they are having a problem. So I think we need to so actually when it happens, it's so complex to deal with it. Let us try to focus on prevention because that is cost effective.
We have 1 minute on the show. What is your message to parents watching us right now?
I would tell parents to please protect your children. You are the first person, both of the mother and the father, I think. They are the first people, and of course extended family, who have to play a role in protection. And I would say even when the child goes to schools, take your mind a little off only looking at exams and education. See whether the child is behaving normally, is there some change in his or her behavior. Get the confidence of the child to be able to tell them right at the beginning there is something happening in terms of a potential, pedophile, and confide in the parents. So, because then if they confide in parents can protect them, and I think early action can be taken to prevent abuse taking place.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hiranthi Vijayman, a child rights expert, former chairperson of the National Child Protection Authority. With that, we wrap up this edition of Newsline. Have a great Monday morning.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukut Ali.